we are now getting further hints that Season 4 is getting ever closer, because after the presumed voiced duration of Plunderstorm lasting for 6 weeks, which would put the end of the event to the 30th of April. Now, if you were to wonder why would the 30th of April be the end date of this event, well, if we have to pick up the roadmap of content given to us by Blizzard, that would fit very nicely with the release of Season 4. Now, what also goes hand in hand with the release of a new season also is the nerfing of the current raid, to get more and more guilds to reach cutting edge. This was something Blizzard pointed out before. Their general goal for raid bosses by the end of the season is to reach about 1,200 plus boss kills at the very end. Now take your time to look at this. What we have right now are the boss kills plus the tier duration from BFA into Shadowlands into Dragonflight. And you can see that more or less this goal was always reached. Of course, many times this goal has to be reached by Blizzard intervening with their balance tuning, like for example when it happened with the Jailer last expansion, which received way more nerfs than a boss like Sylvanas or even like Denathrius, which got to far higher kills as well. The current situation we are at with Fyrakk is only 780, so we are still quite far behind the 1200 plus goal set by Blizzard for a last boss in a tier. Now, the situation isn't nearly as terrible. We have to be honest. We are now transitioning from just looking at the boss kills plus the tier duration and making an average. So we are taking the boss kills and dividing them by the amount of months into a tier. Because of course, certain tiers lasted 5 months, others lasted 10. So it's not fair to compare the kills in total. And these are the boss kills per month, depending on how long the tier lasted. So you can see that Fyrakk at the very least goes from being the absolute worst right now to being better than the Jailer and more or less equal with Ajara. Still, of course, as we can see, a far cry from the boss kills per month of Sarkareth and Razaget in this expansion. So we have received a bunch of changes in terms of tuning to both Tindral and Fyrakk. The nerfs to Tindral start on a healer-focused note and will continue on a healer-focused note because most of the changes here are going to have to do with mostly just healing. Number 1, fiery growth targets are reduced to 3 instead of 4, meaning you now have 1 less dispel. Presumably, it is still going to target at least 1 healer, so now it's going to be 1 healer and 2 ranged DPS. Now, to be fair, the hardest part of the dispel was doing number 1 and number 2 correctly, and then number 3 and 4 sort of were, an afterthought later on, but this will save you having to organize externals and defensives for the 4th guy that has to keep the fiery growth on himself for a very long time. This will make it just smoother. The damage nerf is not extremely relevant. If we go to Tindral and we look at fiery growth, this is the damage being nerfed by 20%, so we're not talking about a massive help in terms of damage being reduced. Falling Star is a little bit more relevant. It's still not the main hitter of the fight, but it still compounds on a lot of problems throughout the fight in terms of consistent damage, because they are 3rd, sure, but Supernova is 2nd, right? And this only matters for about 30 seconds throughout the entire fight. So it's a definitely welcome change. And lastly, Pulsing Heart's damage reduced by 10%. This is also rather irrelevant. You don't even know what this is because, well, it's not even here. Pulsing Heart is TLDR, the damage done by the Treants, whenever they're actually, spawning from the roots, and the damage is very low. So the main change, as mentioned, is mostly healer focused. It's mostly about making fiery growth more manageable for groups. Then we have the changes and the nerfs to Fyrakk. The first change is that the Shadow Cage now lasts for 12 seconds. Now, I'm assuming, of course, this refers to the stun of the Shadow Cage and not the time it takes for the stun to actually happen. Now, for those who are not aware, these are the Shadow Cages mechanic in Mythic. You get 4 of these purple circles around players. Players are instructed to have 2 of them move over to Cross and 2 of them to move over to Star, and then 4 players will get a smaller fire circle on them. If you get this, you have to click a macro. Once you click the macro, you're assigned to either Cross or star. One of the 4 will go to cross, one of the 4 will go to star, and 2 will just AFK to the side. You have to time now the creation of the stun of the cage, which is right here, with the ending of the fire debuff that you have on you. It still says soon, because the stun isn't happening yet. Now it happened, now I have to break the stun with my fire debuff. You go in there, pop, the stun is broken. What I'm assuming this refers to is the actual stun. If you get stunned and the fire guy doesn't break you from the stun, you are stunned forever. You have to wait another rotation of shadow cages to get another fire circle to break that guy. So I'm assuming this refers to now the stun actually lasts for 12 seconds instead of being endless, which is still good, but not that necessary because you're not supposed to be failing that mechanic. Then you have a couple of changes which are, I guess, helpful, but still not that necessary, which is Flamebound now increases damage taken from the flame orbs by 5% instead of 30%, and then Shadowbound increases the damage taken from shadow orbs by 5% instead of 30%. This is a pretty chunky reduction in damage taken in the intermission, because in the intermission half the raid gets Flamebound, which means you have to only soak the flame orbs, and if you get touched by a shadow orb you get 1 shot, and the other half of the raid gets Shadowbound, which means you have to only soak the shadow orbs, and if you get touched by a fire orb you get 1 shot. However, this debuff is also constantly increasing the damage you're taking by your same color orbs you're soaking by 30%. So it's 30 and then 60 and then 90, and then by the very end of the intermission you start getting chunked down very dangerously low, especially if your DPS is slow, is slacking, and the shield is being broken late. It gets quite dangerous towards the end. Now with this nerf, well, it's gonna be much more sustainable to not have random deaths in the intermission. Talking about helping progress, we have one of the bigger changes, of course, which is the nerf to Blaze. Blaze damage has been decreased by 20% in Mythic difficulty. Now, it doesn't seem nearly as impactful, right? Because when you look at here, Blaze is only 70 million damage, and Fyrakk himself is doing over 700, so it's less than 10% of the entire damage done by the encounter throughout all of the phases. However, it is definitely one of the more dangerous parts of the encounter, especially in P1, which is also one of the more, I guess, farmed phases by this boss for players. Yes, again, Blaze itself is not doing that much damage in this phase. It's only hitting about 300k 36 times. Doesn't seem that dangerous, but when paired with other mechanics is where it becomes deadly. In particular, of course, Wildfire. Timing the hit of the blazes plus the hit of the wildfire is a classic combo of one-shotting players right now in phase 1. This is what this nerf is intended to help. Helping not the getting one shot by Blaze itself, but rather to help not getting double tapped by Blaze plus whatever other mechanic is coming right after, like the frontals of the copies of Fyrakk plus the Blazes coming at the same time, etc, etc. That's what this is going to be helping the groups progressing on the boss right now. Talking about helping, this one actually doesn't really help the group in general. This is actually just a buff to every healer not named Mistweaver. Or alternatively, this can be just a nerf to Mistweaver. That's it. Because the max HP of the Darnassian Ancient, so the big add you have to heal in P2, has been nerfed by 20% in Mythic. Now, if we go to the healing rankings of Amir Jassil right now in Mythic, Mistweaver is already, as you see, pretty popular, but it gets even more popular later down for the last couple of bosses, in particular for Fyrakk. And if you go throughout any of these healers, even a random one, let's say right now it's 1220, let's pick number 20 in the rankings over here. In the healing, you will see that, the Shaman is doing about basically no healing to the adds, and then you have the Discipline Priest about 12 million on the small adds, the Paladin is doing 18 million on the small adds, and then you have the Monk doing 33 million on the Ancient. Obviously, I'm joking, even if the Monk was completely AFK and not even touching that Ancient and losing 33 million healing, he would still be gapping any other healer by 20+% HPS. That's how broken the spec is right now, but It's a nerf in the sense that now the Mistweaver Monk will have less to heal on this ad. I guess you can see it differently. It's a help for groups to be able to heal this phase without a Mistweaver Monk, so you have less of a hard time dealing with this fat single target HP mana sinking NPC if you don't have a Mistweaver Monk in your comp. But besides that, it's not that relevant of a change. It's definitely way more of an effect, these changes for Fyrakk, the changes to Blaze. And then secondly, having a smoother intermission with the soaking of the orbs. And lastly, just in case you were messing that up, the Shadow Cage now no longer lasting forever. These are the big nerfs coming for the last couple of bosses of this raid as an attempt from Blizzard to raise up the kill numbers of the last boss of the tier to get closer to their ideal 1200 plus kills goal by the end of this season, which, as we mentioned, should be coming quite soon, in about 3 weeks-ish, 3 to 4 weeks, basically a month left to this season. It will definitely help, of course, this one being a nerf, but obviously questions will be raised about the timing of this nerf. If perhaps we couldn't have gotten a few more touches to these couple of bosses quite a few weeks ago, rather than getting to act on these two bosses so late in the tier. However, for today, on this Tuesday, on this, I guess, reset day in NA, it is time to leave each other. We are starting the salutations by thanking all of the Patreon supporters, and then, together with everyone else who is supporting for free, like liking and commenting down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with all of this gone out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I think the final kills of Fyrakk for the tier will actually go up to 1250.